A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Joshua Rowe is the ACL State Director for New South Wales and the ACT. Hey Joshua, a special welcome back to 2020.
Thank you, Neil. It's always a pleasure to be here with you.
Let's get a focus on New South Wales, Joshua. Hey, there's a positive reform that's been tabled in the New South Wales Parliament. Nice to be starting off with something that might have some good news associated with it, focusing on freedom of religion, conscience and association for faith-based aged care facilities. What's developing in New South Wales?
This is a bill, Neil, introduced by the Honourable Susan Carter, who's a Liberal member of the Upper House in New South Wales. Now, the legislation was introduced on the 15th of October, and the intent behind it is to provide protection for faith-based aged care to be able to decline having assisted suicide performed at their premises. So this is very similar to faith-based hospitals in New South Wales. They are afforded this institutional right to object to having assisted suicide on their premises. But at this point in time, faith-based aged care are actually required to have a room or a space where their residents can access assisted suicide. Now, what Susan Carter's intention is here is to afford that same protection and opt-out opportunity for faith-based aged care to say, no, we actually want to uphold a culture of life and of faith in this facility where people can come and know that assisted suicide is not being performed. So to actually legislatively provide them that ability to decide to either provide a space or to actually opt out and not have a space where assisted suicide can be accessed. In this instance, people would be able to access assisted suicide, but they would be transferred to another premises for that to be taken, to be undertaken.
So, Joshua, as you say, hospitals a little bit different to aged care here, and you want this provision to be in law for aged care providers, like it is for the hospitals in New South Wales. Now, there's a big story around things developing around the nation, but this would be a positive thing to have this protection for aged care institutions.
I think it's really important because this is people's home. Aged care is people's home. And for people who are of faith and have a high view of the sanctity of life, they want to know that they're living somewhere and that they're safe to live somewhere that doesn't actually perform assisted suicide and that accords with their values and their faith and their conscience. And so it's really important that this is extended to those institutions. Now, we're not saying that those residents don't have access to assisted suicide under this legislation. They still do. But just like with other specialist care where someone's being transferred out for a specialist appointment, it would be the same if a resident wanted to access assisted suicide and they lived at that faith-based facility. Transfer arrangements would be made so that they could go and receive information and the like. But this bill is actually empowering those faith-based aged care facilities to have religious freedom, to be able to have the autonomy to choose to uphold an environment that doesn't hasten death through assisted suicide. And I think that's really important in New South Wales, and that's why we're supporting the legislation.
So an empowerment for those faith-based aged care facilities, and there are those who are trying to take away rights like moves that have been happening with hospitals, and you're responsible too for the ACT. It seems to be that faith-based institutions have been trampled over in the ACT. Is that something that might be ahead in New South Wales if people don't, speak up and say no further?
Well, I think it's always something we've got to keep our ear to the ground on, Neil. We've seen, as you referenced, Calvary Hospital in Canberra be forcibly acquired by the Legislative Assembly here, the ACT government. They passed that legislation, the Health Infrastructure Enabling Act, very quickly to give them those executive powers. And that was a real indication of state overreach into the life of faith-based institutions and community and their ability to operate freely in accordance with their beliefs. We've got to continue to monitor this in New South Wales. I believe we talked earlier in the year about the New South Wales Greens abortion bill and their attempt to require certain hospitals, including faith-based hospitals, to provide abortion. And now we see in this legislation with assisted suicide that there is this expectation on faith-based providers to provide a place where assisted suicide is undertaken. So in all of these instances, we see a continual theme that there's an encroachment from state legislation upon faith-based institutions and communities, and a requirement of them to act in a certain way that often does not accord with their beliefs and their value systems. Now, in a free society, that should not be the case. It is really important that we uphold, as a democracy, freedom of religion, freedom of association and speech, and especially on matters like this that pertain to the conscience and deeply ethical issues, we need to give people the freedom to be able to object. And in fact, collective communities, associations, faith-based providers in this instance, the ability to collectively object to performing certain procedures that don't accord with their beliefs.
And another illustration, isn't it, of the way that our religious freedoms are gradually being whittled away, and you've got to be able to stand up and say what you mean and expect there's going to be some changes. And, some people say, well, what are people at the Australian Christian Lobby doing? Well, you've been involved in quite a significant statement, a joint statement, from something like 27 faith leaders on this particular subject, giving the church a voice here, and honour to you for being a part of this and getting behind it. What are the leaders saying?
Yeah, so we were able to be a part of drafting a statement which calls for supporting this legislation in New South Wales Parliament in the Upper House. That statement was signed by 27 faith leaders, including some medical associations as well. And what that statement's main call is to the Legislative Council, to those members of the Upper House, to use their conscience, because they get a conscience vote on this issue, to use their conscience to protect our community's conscience. Now, faith-based community's conscience says that the sanctity of life is of very high value. And so we want to provide life-affirming, compassionate end-of-life care. And we would like the New South Wales government, but other members as well who have a conscience vote, to recognise and respect that that's very important to us as a faith community in New South Wales, and to use their vote to protect our conscience so that we can operate freely in accordance with our beliefs. And that statement has gone out last week. We're going to be adding more signatures to it this week. We're going to do a revised statement. I believe we'll have over 30 faith leaders saying we need to support this legislation. And what a great indication that is of right across New South Wales, Christian communities being willing to stand up and say, hey, we love and we do affirm life, and we would like you to protect our freedom, to reflect that in our institutions.
And perhaps a positive to appreciate that there is a precedent in South Australia for this kind of institutional protection. Is that something, do you think, that might affect the way that legislators in New South Wales might think about this?
Well, I think that's really important. And I've actually been doing a little bit more research on euthanasia laws over the last few days. And I've noticed that Victoria, Tasmania and Western Australia, as well as South Australia, provide protections akin to the one we're discussing here, Neil. Now, the reason that I think that's really important is there was actually some legal advice offered by Arthur Moses SC and Patrick Kaiser, two constitutional lawyers, and they were suggesting that this bill might be constitutionally invalid. Now, that has been since contradicted by a number of professors in law, academics, as well as some other reputable legal scholars like Dr. Mark Fowler and the like, saying that this bill is certainly constitutionally valid, and it is an appropriate and accepted reform for state-based legislation. The important thing about having precedent in Victoria, Tasmania, Western Australia and South Australia, without any constitutional debate about those protections in those jurisdictions, is that it is perfectly okay under the Constitution, and that it's a reform that should indeed be reflected in New South Wales, so faith-based aged care providers have this protection. So, yeah, very important to see that precedent, and in fact reflects upon the fact that this bill really should pass on Wednesday when it goes up for debate, because it's a reform that's already got precedent around the country.
Okay, it's being voted on this Wednesday. You've got faith leaders making a joint statement to those upper house members saying, hey, don't let this happen. What about ordinary ones sitting in, their lounge room or driving their car right now? What can we do today to support the initiative?
What I want to say to you is that we really need stories and testimony from constituents, from people in New South Wales, who can speak to the importance of having a protection like this for faith-based aged care. So if you're someone sitting there thinking, hey, I'm a registered nurse, or I'm a carer within a residential aged care facility, or I'm a resident, or I'm a family member of a resident, and they are admitted at a faith-based aged care provider, and if it's really important to you that these institutions uphold a culture of life and not death, and that assisted suicide is actually not present on those facilities, so that or your workplace is safe and accords with your values, please reach out to us and share how important that is in a testimonial, in a story to us. Say why that's important to you and how this protection would help you to exercise and live out your faith in New South Wales with a sense of dignity and respect. Now, you can do that by going to www.acl.org.au, and if you scroll down to the bottom, you can click Contact Us. We've got a national office inbox there and a phone number. Please just take the time to write a quick email or pick up the phone and call, and you can get in contact with me, get that story across to me, and it may well be referenced in New South Wales Parliament this Wednesday in support of that legislation. Okay,
seeking stories and a real opportunity for ordinary listeners to take part in what will be very, very significant. Hey, Joshua Rowe from the Australian Christian Lobby is our guest. Hey, Joshua, the New South Wales Conversion Ban Act. What's the latest here? Because real concerns around criminalising prayer and pastoral care. This is a big concern. What's happening in New South Wales?
It is a big concern, Neil. In April, this legislation come into effect, and what we saw was concern in the Christian community because the advice that was given by Anti-Discrimination New South Wales, AD New South Wales for short, that's the body that are responsible for policing this legislation. The advice that they gave indicated that certain prayers and pastoral care that accorded with a biblically orthodox view on sex, being male and female, and marriage being between a man and a woman to the exclusion of all others, was something that actually falls afoul of this law, considered potentially a conversion practice that could be punishable under law. Now, our concern was immediately that pastors and ministry leaders would actually fall afoul of this legislation, just ministering faithfully to the gospel and faithfully to biblical truth on these matters. So a real concern for us, and we've been taking further action on that. We organised last week a pastors webinar for Christian ministers across New South Wales, and I'm pleased to report we had 155 Christian ministers in New South Wales sign up to that webinar to get informed and equipped about how to respond to this legislation in a wise way that recognises the authority of the state, but also recognises the importance of maximising our faithfulness to God and recognising that when laws call us to actually transgress the word of the Lord or to go against what he says to be true, that we need to actually minister in a wise way, but in a way that's faithful to his scripture and faithful to God. So we've put on that webinar, and we've had many pastors come through and feel equipped by that. They understand the legislation better, and they also feel encouraged and emboldened to continue to go and minister faithfully to this community, to those who are same-sex attracted or struggling with sex confusion in their life, Neil.
You know, some things are a quick fix, but politics and legislation isn't like that. It's a long game. You're looking towards the 2027 New South Wales state election to see some level of fixing of this act. You've got to play the long game here, haven't you? And so you need supporters who are going to stand alongside you for the long game too.
Yeah, we really do. And speaking of it being a long game, right back at the state election in 2023, we had the Premier, Chris Minns, make a promise. He said, an individual of their own consent seeking guidance through prayer will not be banned. Now, we've seen that that's not true. That hasn't been reflected in the legislation. And so we're calling on especially church pastors, ministers and leaders that this bill directly affects to stand up and say, hey, the Premier hasn't followed through with that promise to faith communities. What I've gone and done, Neil, is written an open letter which reflects on this promise made by the Premier, as well as how this promise has been transgressed, and then calls for the act to be fixed. Now, people can access that at www.acl.org/freedom New South Wales /freedom New South Wales. You're able to then share that. If you can share it with pastors or church leaders, we're really looking to get signatures from those church leaders and pastors on that open letter. And we want to deliver that to the government and say, hey, there are Christian communities that have been directly affected by this legislation that has targeted them, and we need you to fix it before the next election. Otherwise, we're going to be running a campaign with all of the churches to ensure that the government hears that it's very important our religious freedom is protected on this issue, so we can continue to minister freely in that way in New South Wales.
Some good actions happening on your behalf there, so far as those letters to legislators in New South Wales. Hey, just pick up on another issue that's going on. There's a positive reform from New South Wales Libertarian John Ruddick to explicitly prohibit sex selection abortions. We talk about this every now and then. Give us your insight into what's developing around John Ruddick.
Well, it's a great day on the radio when we can talk about two positive reforms, Neil. I'm really pleased to say that we are. And this one's also a great one. It's seeking to outlaw sex-selective abortions. Now, what we've seen in New South Wales is that there was some research conducted by Edith Cowan University that indicated in certain migrant populations, namely Chinese and Indian populations, that there was actually a preferencing for boys over girls. So this discrimination on the basis of sex, and then an abortion being performed for sex-selective purposes, so on the basis of that sex. Now, this currently in medical regulation in New South Wales is prohibited, but medical regulation doesn't carry penalties in the same way. It's more like a guideline. So what this legislation is seeking to do, that John Ruddick has put forth, is actually promote that prohibition into law and create certain penalties, both financially and with the removal of professional indemnity insurance to those practitioners who actually undertake an abortion for sex-selective purposes. This one's likely to be debated in February next year, and we do at our website, again, which I've referenced a couple of times tonight, or this morning, should I say, www.acl.org.au, have a petition available and an ability for you to write an email to your Member of Parliament. So you can go to the Take Action section on our website, and it will actually help you craft an email to write to your local member to call for this reform to pass next year.
Okay, there's action steps that can be taken by listeners on all of these things that we've been talking about today, whether it's the VAD in aged care facilities or whether it's that New South Wales Conversion Ban Act. And now as we're talking about sex-selective abortions, and for listeners to take some action, all you've got to do to find out some more, sometimes you just need to see things being talked about in writing and saying, well, what action can I take now? Let me encourage you to visit the Australian Christian Lobby website at acl.org.au, acl.org.au, and if there's something to sign or if there's some activity that you can participate in some of these reforms, why don't you be a part of that? It's something you can do right now. acl.org.au. And Joshua Rowe is the ACL State Director for New South Wales and the ACT. There's lots of things going on right around the nation, and good to get a little bit of a focus and a little bit extra depth than just a throwaway line talking about things that are going on in New South Wales. Joshua, thanks so much for taking some time to share your insights with us today on 2020.
Thanks, Neil. And can I just say to listeners to close, sometimes it just takes the courage to act on this for the first time. And it's important that you do get behind us, because without that support, it's so much harder for us to see these reforms pass. So thank you for your support and thank you for taking action. God bless you, Neil, and thanks for having me on the show today.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.